Over the course of this trial, the state will present its case against Mr. Ferlazzo. This opening statement is the state's opportunity to let you know what we expect the evidence will show in this case. We expect to show you testimony from numerous witnesses, admission of exhibits like videos, photographs, and physical evidence. And all of that testimony will show that Joseph Ferlazzo, in the early morning hours of October 16th of 2021, in Bolton, Vermont, while in the couple's camper van, jumped on top of his wife while she laid in bed, put a red throw pillow over her head, and shot her twice. The evidence will show that his wife, Emily Ferlazzo, posed no threat to him. And the evidence will show that immediately after shooting Emily in the head twice, he put a plastic bag over her head, tied a garbage bag around her neck, carried her body to the bathroom, bagged up a bloody pillow, bedding, and the red throw pillow with 2 bullet holes in it, and put that in another garbage bag. He flipped the mattress over, powered off Emily's cell phone, put her shoes, glasses, wallet, and phone in a bag, and went to bed. And it will show that over the next 4 days, Mr. Ferlazzo went to great lengths to cover up his actions. The evidence will show that his killing of Emily was unlawful, meaning there was no legal justification for it. It was willful, it was intentional, it was deliberate, and it was premeditated. You will hear testimony about how Joseph and his wife Emily planned a 1-year anniversary trip to Vermont in their van, a bus that they had converted into a camper. They drove up with their dog from New Hampshire on the evening of Friday, October 15th, 2021. They parked at a condominium complex on Bear Run in Bolton Valley off the ski resort's access road. And over the course of the evening, Mr. Ferlazzo and Emily started fighting. She told him she didn't want to be with him. Done fighting, Emily laid down on the bed. Mr. Ferlazzo stayed up and stewed. He became enraged at Emily and jumped on top of her. He put a throw pillow over her head, and right before pulling the trigger, she said to him something. The evidence will show that Mr. Ferlazzo's killing of Emily was unlawful. There was no legal justification for it because Emily posed no threat to him. The state will show this through the forensic evidence and Mr. Ferlazzo's own statements. Through the course of the trial, you'll hear how Mr. Ferlazzo's own statements about what happened match the physical and forensic evidence in this case. You will also not hear any evidence that suggests that Emily posed any threat to Mr. Ferlazzo. You'll hear testimony from Vermont State Police detectives, see the evidence they collected, hear from firearms and DNA experts, and hear from the medical examiner who conducted Emily's autopsy. The evidence will show that Emily was shot with a Glock 19 9mm caliber handgun, a handgun that had been modified with an aftermarket barrel to fit a silencer, while she was lying in bed. She was shot in the head while her head was resting against a pillow, that the bullets left the gun, went through a throw pillow, entered her head on the left side, exited on the right side, and came to a rest inside the pillow and the pillowcases that her head was resting on. You will hear and see a video recorded statement that Mr. Ferlazzo gave to police after he was located. You will hear Mr. Ferlazzo outline in great detail what led up to him shooting Emily. As you're listening to his interview, I want you to listen closely to his own words. Mr. Ferlazzo will never say that Emily was a threat to him. He will never say that he thought Emily was going to kill him. He will never say that he was scared for his life. What you will hear repeatedly is that Emily had stopped fighting and that she had laid down. The state will present further testimony and evidence about how after Mr. Ferlazzo killed his wife, that he just went about his business like normal. He enjoyed his vacation, he was not distraught, he did not seek help, and he did not explain to anyone that he had just made a horrible mistake. The physical and forensic evidence will show that Mr. Ferlazzo's actions were willful, deliberate, and premeditated. In addition to hearing from the firearms examiner, the medical examiner, and the police who processed the van, you'll hear testimony from a digital forensic expert who analyzed Emily's phone and also Mr. Ferlazzo's cell phone. You'll learn that Mr. Ferlazzo turned his phone off at midnight. While his phone was powered off, he killed Emily, and then he turned her phone off at 1 a.m. Mr. Ferlazzo then turned his own phone back on at 1:30. You'll also hear about how he shot her through the pillow, muffling the sounds of gunshots. And you'll hear that he didn't just shoot her one time, he shot her 2 times. Mr. Ferlazzo's own statements will show that his actions were willful, deliberate, and premeditated. He tells police that something inside of me said enough is enough. He said that that Emily had been trying to unfurl his piece while he was on vacation, and that a wave came over him, and he described that wave as rage. He tells detectives that Emily was laying in bed for 5 to 10 minutes before he decided to get up and get his gun and shoot her. You'll hear him repeatedly talk about this decision, about how he made this decision to shoot her. The state will further present testimony and evidence showing all of the efforts that Mr. Ferlazzo took after he killed Emily to concoct a story of her disappearance and his plans to cover up the crime. You will hear testimony from numerous witnesses about what Mr. Ferlazzo does after he kills Emily, what he told his sister, his friends, his in-laws, and the police to cover up his actions. Immediately after shooting Emily 2 times in the head, he ties a plastic bag around her head to stymie the blood that was leaking from her head wounds. He then tied a black garbage bag around her neck to create a seal. He used his 6-foot, 200-pound frame to carry her 5'1", 130-pound body into the bathroom. He stripped the bed, bagged up the bloody bedding, including the pillow that her head was resting on. He bagged up the red pillow with the bullet holes. There was blood on the mattress. He flipped the mattress over. He bagged up Emily's eyeglasses, her cell phone, her shoes, and her wallet. But you'll learn that he keeps her ID. And he puts them in a plastic grocery bag. And he eventually throws those things away somewhere at a gas station. You'll see the numerous text messages that Mr. Ferlazzo sends to Emily over Emily's phone over the weekend. The same phone that he turned off and put in a bag and threw away. From Saturday at 1 o'clock.
Prosecutor Sally Adams detailing the evidence. Boy, there sure seems to be a lot of it against this defendant. We'll get a break, pick up her opening statement where we left off right after this. This hour, we are in the state of Vermont. It's our new live trial. It's the van life and death murder trial. The defendant here, Joseph Ferlazzo. He faces a jury for the murder of his wife back in 2020. Although Ferlazzo admitted to committing the fatal shooting, he's pled not guilty. Seems like a lot of evidence. We're watching the prosecution deliver its opening statement to this jury, which was seated yesterday. Let's pick it up right where we left off.
From Saturday at 1 o'clock until Monday at 10:30 in the morning, he sends 16 text messages to her phone, asking where she is, asking her to come back, getting angry with her for not answering his calls or his text, and eventually telling her that he about how Emily's body was dismembered after she was killed with a serrated tool like a handsaw. You'll also hear that Emily's body was stabbed 18 times after she was killed. 1 stab to her chest, hitting her heart, 8 stabs to her abdomen, 9 stabs to her back. The medical examiner will tell you that these were stab wounds, not slicing wounds. And you'll hear Mr. Ferlazzo admit to cutting up Emily's body with a saw, putting it in garbage bags, and how he intended to bring her body into the woods and discard it. You'll hear how he greets his sister on Saturday morning after killing Emily with a text and says, "I just made some coffee. I can bring you some." He takes a shower at her Airbnb. They go to breakfast. When his sister asks where Emily is, he says she's sleeping. They have breakfast, he eats, he drinks a mimosa. They make plans to go to St. Albans, where another friend of his lives. He gives his sister a tattoo. They go out to dinner that night in St. Albans. On Sunday, he meets his sister for brunch here in Burlington. They hang out. He goes back to his friend's house in St. Albans, hangs out at a bonfire. You will hear testimony from an individual who was at that bonfire, an off-duty police officer, who will say that Mr. Ferlazzo was acting like a normal person and taking hits off a marijuana bomb at the bonfire. During that bonfire, he doesn't say anything to any of his friends or this off-duty police officer about what happened, or that he felt he had no other option but to kill Emily, or that he made a horrible mistake. The evidence will show that he began executing his plan to get rid of Emily's body. He cuts her up using a saw. He puts her body in trash bags. The evidence will show that in order to bring those trash bags into the woods to discard them, he needed to go to New Hampshire and get his Jeep. He drove his motorcycle that was stored at his friend's house in St. Albans 3 hours to his in-laws' house in New Hampshire where his Jeep was. When they ask him, "Where's Emily?" he says, "We got into a fight and she left on Saturday." Doesn't know where she is. His in-laws then report Emily missing. When the police call to speak to Mr. Ferlazzo about his missing wife, Mr. Ferlazzo tells the trooper the made-up story about how Emily went missing on Saturday, somewhere in Bolton, and the police ask him where his van is. Mr. Ferlazzo lies to the police and tells them that the van's not running well and that it is at an auto shop. He tells them that that auto shop is in Virgins. The evidence will show that this is when Mr. Ferlazzo's cover-up starts unraveling. The evidence will show that before Mr. Ferlazzo left his in-laws' home in St. Albans, they convinced him to turn on location sharing services on his phone. He started driving from New Hampshire back to Vermont around 8:15 on Monday night. On the way, he texts a friend who lives in Enosburg and says that he's going to be showing up at his house on Monday night at 11:20. While Mr. Ferlazzo is driving from New Hampshire to Vermont, police learn that the van is not in Virgins and they locate the van in St. Albans. And they post a couple of troopers outside of the van. Mr. Ferlazzo eventually arrives at his friend's house in Enosburg. They hop in his friend's car because Mr. Ferlazzo has said, "I need a ride to go get my van." As they're driving and getting close to where the van is parked at his friend's house in St. Albans, they start to see troopers. Mr. Ferlazzo tells his friend to turn around. His friend confronts him about what's going on, asking him if those troopers are for him. Mr. Ferlazzo tells his friend the police are looking for Emily, that she's in the van, that she's not alive, and that he shot her. When his friend attempts to kick him out of his car, Mr. Ferlazzo starts panicking, acting like he's going to jump out of the car, asks his friend to shoot him, and says he can't go to prison. His friend calls 911 as Mr. Ferlazzo walks off into the woods. You'll hear about how after that 911 call, the police start looking for Mr. Ferlazzo. And you'll hear that about 14 hours later, a detective from the Vermont State Police was at the Maple Fields in St. Albans. You'll hear about her seeing Mr. Ferlazzo getting a drink out of the cooler at the Maple Fields. And you'll hear about Mr. Ferlazzo being approached by the troopers, and that trooper will describe that Mr. Ferlazzo appeared deflated and looked like he had given up. She brought him back to the station, and he sat down with detectives for an interview. 42 seconds into the interview, he confesses to shooting Emily. You will hear that confession, and you will see how detailed, thoughtful, and thorough his conversation is. He has time to think about what he's going to say. He's given numerous breaks. He has time to contemplate. He has time to change his story or correct inaccuracies. At no point during his statement will you ever hear him say that he thought Emily was going to kill him, hurt him, or that she posed any threat to him. In fact, at numerous points during his statement, you will hear him talk about how angry he was with her and how he wanted to stop her and how he made a decision. As you're taking in all of the evidence over the next couple of days, I want you to pay close attention to what you hear and also what you don't hear. You won't hear or see any evidence that indicates that this was a lawful or justified killing. You won't see any evidence that indicates that Emily posed a threat to him. You won't see any evidence that indicates that Mr. Ferlazzo couldn't make decisions, couldn't think straight, couldn't form intent to kill. In fact, you'll hear the opposite. After all the evidence is presented, Judge Pack will read you the law. He'll read instructions on the essential elements of the offense and provide definitions of those legal terms. You will be asked to decide whether the state has met its burden of proving these essential elements beyond a reasonable doubt, and we are confident that we can and will meet that burden. The state will meet its burden and show beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Ferlazzo was the person who committed this offense, that Mr. Ferlazzo caused the death of his wife, Emily Ferlazzo, that Mr. Ferlazzo's killing of Emily was unlawful, meaning there was no legal justification for it, that he intended to kill Emily, meaning it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't an accident, that he acted willfully, that he acted deliberately, and that he acted with premeditation. And we believe that this evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt to every single one of you serving on this jury that Mr. Ferlazzo is guilty of the unlawful, intentional, willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing of Emily. And we will be asking you to return a verdict of guilty. Thank you.